Hey there guys, today we're taking a look at Grand Theft Auto 5 running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5560U. Now this Zen 3 APU is a very interesting one because it essentially takes what was essentially the 5500U, which is a Zen 2 based APU, practically ports over the entire design of it onto Zen 3. So you end up with pretty much the same core count and same cache configuration as the 5500U. It's just with the Zen 3 architecture instead of Zen 2. But curiously, instead of continuing to use the Radeon 7 graphics, which have 7 GPU cores and a maximum clock speed of 1800 megahertz, we get the Radeon 6 instead, which is 6 cores instead of 7, and it only clocks up to 1600 megahertz. So we lose an entire core and 200 megahertz on each individual core. It's essentially the iGPU that you will find on most of the Ryzen 3 mobile CPUs. Now, paired with this specific CPU, it at least performs pretty decently. As you can see right now, we have GTA 5 running with the lowest in-game graphics settings, which is essentially all set to normal or off. Crowd density and street density and all of that was set to pretty much what is default, which is around 40% of the entire bar. It doesn't really give you any exact amount, so you kind of just have to eyeball it. But in general, just driving around here in the single player, the level of performance that we were getting was decent enough. We certainly weren't hitting a 60 FPS average, but we weren't too far from it. And just looking based off of the 1% lows and the averages, they're consistent enough that you're going to be able to play through the entirety of the campaign here at the full 1080p resolution. Now, if you'd like to have a higher refresh rate experience, you can always drop down to 900p, but I felt like 1080p was more than doable. Now, I'm sure the vast majority of you guys out there aren't actually playing the single player in this game. You're more than likely jumping onto GTA Online. Now, personally, I don't play GTA Online, so I don't know what people do on this in particular, but just loading in and driving around in the open world, there is a noticeable difference in terms of performance. You pretty much end up losing a good chunk of FPS here because of the fact that we're now in a persistent online world, and so the density of everything and the intensity of everything going on is just higher overall. So the load that we get on here is pretty significant. We're now looking at 1% lows that are pretty much at the lower end of the 30 range, with an FPS average that is at least consistent, though it is just noticeably worse now than what it was in the single player. In the single player, we weren't hitting 60 at the full 1080p resolution, but we were at least at 50 for most of it. This time around, we're more like in the 40s range, and sometimes we even drop below that. So in general, it's playable. It's not going to be an amazing experience, but dropping down to 900p will actually boost a lot of this. I just felt like at 1080p, it is at least playable enough, especially if you grew up playing this on console. You're pretty much already used to these kinds of frame rates. But anyways, I hope you found this quick look at GTA 5 running on the Ryzen 5 5560U to be interesting and useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.